American universities in the danger zone, university ugly once again, Bernie Sanders being the rich hypocrite that everybody knew he was, and Charlie Kirk coming up next. That's right, Captain Kirk in the house. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Duke, and I hope you had a wonderful 4th of July. Joined today, as usual, by Katie Petrick of the Healthy Republic, and we're going to do the countdown. Katie, what do you got for us today?
Well, today on our 20th episode, we're going to actually take a little bit of a look back, because we've had a crazy couple past weeks, couple months, year and a half, really. And so I think lost in the hustle, you may have missed out that the U.S. has now been ranked number 10th in the most dangerous country in the world for women.
Yeah, this is from the same people who brought you the United Nations Human Rights Council, right? Which Nikki Haley in the United States just pulled out of for obvious reasons. When you've got a Human Rights Council at the United Nations that's got people like Vietnam and North Korea, has rotated through people from just absolute South Africa, places with just horrible human rights violations. Nikki Haley was right to pull out this. It's the same clown show mindset here, right? When you look at the criterion by which they interviewed 546 people across the world, just a absolutely comprehensive survey of 546 women across the globe, and they factored in such odd things like the hashtag #MeToo movement. In fact, the reason America's ranked number 10th, the 10th most dangerous place in the world for women, is because of the hashtag #MeToo, right? And what that tells me is places like Lakewood, Ohio, Appleton, Wisconsin, Midland, Texas, are incredibly safe for women. You know which places in America aren't so safe? Hollywood, California. So what we ought to do is send the liberal progressives in places like Hollywood back to social justice school and leave the damn rest of the country alone.
Yeah, but to get perspective on this, India was ranked number 1, Afghanistan 2.
1 as the worst.
As the worst, yep. Afghanistan 2, Syria 3. But here are some of the countries not in the top 10. So the United States is worse for women's rights than these countries. Sudan, where 34% of women aged 15 to 49 believe that it's justified for their husband to beat them.
Sudan, the land of the clitorectomy, right? The
go.
Forced clitorectomy, right?
We have Mali, where only 38% of girls have completed primary school.
Right, another Muslim country where women have no basic human rights compared to men, ranked higher in safety for women than the United States. Who else you got?
And Iraq.
Oh.
So where 1 in 5 women are victims to domestic violence, and at least 36% of married women are abused. And
gay women are executed.
Yep.
And women who talk to men who aren't their husbands can be potentially stoned. Right? So, and here's another thing. Mexico, almost none of the South American countries are on this list. So all of these refugees, the majority of whom are female, right? 51% of the population is female, 49 male. And so the majority of immigrants, illegal immigrants to this country, this horrible country from women, are women with babies. Many of those babies are little girls. If we really were such a horrible country when it comes to women's rights, you wouldn't have all of these so-called safe countries for women like Mexico. Mexico is considered a safe country for women. You wouldn't have safe countries like that sending all their women to us. This is just more anti-American leftism from the screwy progressive wingnuts that get to make up this, apparently get all that Soros money to make up stupid surveys like this.
Yeah, so since we're the most dangerous for women, or 10th most dangerous, I guess, that kind of goes against the whole fact that Planned Parenthood allows women to do whatever they want with their bodies. We found out Planned Parenthood is going to spend a record amount to protect a liberal governor. So there's a race going on in Pennsylvania, in the gubernatorial race, and this is the incumbent, and he's called a brick wall against pro-life efforts. So basically, they're going to spend $1.5 million on this race alone, one governor's race in Pennsylvania. And Sari Stevens, who's the executive director of Planned Parenthood of Pennsylvania Advocates, describes the governor as Tom Wolfe, of all names. He's a brick wall. And his record is that he vetoed legislation which would have banned dismemberment, abortion, and terminations after 20 weeks. And in April, he actually just opposed a bill which would have barred mothers from aborting their unborn babies due to positive prenatal Down syndrome diagnoses. And just for the record, Wolfe and his wife in the past have been patient escorts to help women to get to Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, and so maybe now I begin to understand why America is the 10th most dangerous country in the world for women. This might explain it. Planned Parenthood devotes so much of its time and energy and so much of our taxpayer money. I mean, let that sink in. We're paying $500 million every year to Planned Parenthood to primarily abort babies. Nobody aborts more babies than Planned Parenthood. So we're paying $500 million to Planned Parenthood. They're sending millions and millions and millions back to politicians like this. He's a brick house, right? To protect abortion rights. And he won't even protect babies from dismemberment in late-term abortions. This is maybe, now we understand it. When you consider the fact that, again, the majority of babies aborted simply by virtue of the gender gap, the majority of babies aborted are female babies. Given that, maybe then maybe I should apologize. Maybe this international survey that says America is the 10th most dangerous place for women, maybe that's what they had in mind, the slaughter of young girls that radically annoyingly male governors of Pennsylvania, Mr. Wolf, and his Planned Parenthood enablers, because they're pretty much funding his campaign, tells you something about priorities in the West.
That would make sense. But with a story like this just shows the Democrats and their just inability to put things together. Democrats actually, on Democrats.com, just came out with a story that says, where are the babies? They still wonder, after what we just talked about with Planned Parenthood, where are the babies? So it basically talks about how their excuse and reasoning, what they're saying of where the babies are, is it's with unemployment being so low, it should mean more people are having babies, and they can't figure out why they aren't. Not once in this kind of article that they put out does it mention abortion as a reason. It doesn't have any mention of the LGBT invasion or the war on men as possible reasons. But they have some positive news for their fellow Democrats. They say the low fertility rate isn't a bad thing in and of itself. In the United States, we still have enough young people and kids entering the country as immigrants to keep our population levels fairly steady.
Well, this article also doesn't mention environmentalism, which we keep hearing from the environmentalist wacko left, that too many kids, too many kids, too many kids, too many people, too many people. Bill Gates's plan is to have less than 1 billion people in the world, right, through abortion and radical population control. The left, it's not just that the left can't put things together. The left is incapable of seeing its own hypocrisies, right? And so on the one hand, we have to have less kids because Bill Gates and a bunch of environmental lunatics says we do, and now they're lamenting the fact that there aren't enough babies. But it's okay. What they didn't say in the article, and I'm surprised they didn't say this because this is a left-wing talking point going back 20 years. As more white people, in fact, the demographic that's having the fewest babies are white single women, right? White women in general.
Yeah,
right?
Unless they're older.
Right.
But
when the biological when white women get to the age in the mid 30s to 40s where they realize that feminism has lied to them and that being a power broker in a law firm doesn't provide them absolute happiness, then these mothers take all those fertility pills and give birth to 8 babies, right? But generally speaking, white babies in the West are way down. And it's another one of those talking points that the left loves, because we'll replace white babies with black and brown skin babies, and then we're going to have nirvana. So again, the inability of the left to recognize the consequences of their own. In fact, that's why progressive leftists are so absolutely committed to their stupid failed policies. Whether it's mindless environmentalism, whether it's radical abortion, whether it's any one of 1,000 things that the radical democratic left proposes, they are utterly incapable of recognizing the consequences of their actions. Maybe that's why the left is so good at preaching consequenceless behavior to all of their constituents.
And as a final wrap-up, they spoke about these consequences, except they didn't see it. They didn't see their hypocrisy. They left the women, or anyone reading this Democrats.com article, they said, as more women gain power at work and in public office, particularly during the 2018 midterms, we're likely to see better policies for supporting young families and then maybe more babies again.
Yeah, that's right. So, of course, with the editorializing of this article, it's a fait accompli that because of the outrage against men, that more women will attain power in 2018. I believe it when I see it. There's one woman who didn't get any power in 2016. Her name is Hillary Clinton. Boom. And she was the feminist best choice. Now, having said that, you're exactly right. They are incapable of recognizing their own inefficacies when it comes to policymaking, their own positions, which, again, preach consequencelessness for sexual behavior, for transgenderism. Oh, let's try to convince 4-, and 5-, and 6-year-olds that gender is malleable and they really would be better off as another gender, right? You're doing that to little kids, and you're aborting babies. You're supporting people like Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania, who's a one-man wrecking ball when it comes to babies. I just had a picture of Miley Cyrus swinging in, right? I don't want to see the governor of New York, of Pennsylvania, naked swinging on a wrecking ball. Nobody needs that. Although maybe the people at Planned Parenthood might get off on that. That seems to be their speed. How many millions of dollars are going to this guy?
$1.5 million.
$1.5 million going to protect a government, a governorship in Pennsylvania that is alarmingly pro-abortion. And that money, $1,500,000, came from the federal government right to Planned Parenthood. Congratulations. Way to go, Republican lawmakers.
All right. Well, college is out for the summer, and I know you're happy about that. But the stories are not. We have a story out of the University of Missouri, and they are having a $50 million shortfall because of reduced enrollment. And a lot of this stems back to 2015 in the fall, when basically there were racial protests all over campus. The president and the chancellor had to resign. There was a boycott with the football team, hunger strikes. Spike Lee made a film about it. And since that time, they've struggled to get students to enroll. And people are leaving. And so the school's cutting 185 positions in response to this funding crisis. Also, at that same time, people had to do mandatory diversity and inclusion training for everyone on campus, students and everyone. And I guess there's a quote that was put out, tell me if this doesn't hit the nail on the head for what's happening. So a guy named Tom Hurst, he's a state senator, he said that his daughter chose to go to Missouri State instead because Missouri University is more concerned about their image and Missouri State was more concerned about the student. Now, he himself had attended the University of Missouri, and he felt at the same atmosphere had prevailed. He says, I feel like I had to educate myself versus having the professors educate me. They didn't care if I showed up or not. They were going to get paid anyway.
First of all, I got to go way back to the beginning of that and give one minor correction. Spike Lee hasn't made a film in 20 years. He makes propaganda videos, but it's a small thing. I understand it. But what I don't understand is, and I think it's going to happen, why isn't this happening at every major university? When you think about how it is the major universities in our nation that are advocating this, that our culture is irredeemably sexist, that men are toxic by definition, just bringing males to campus toxifies the environment. When universities are arguing that they're making up rape statistics to make it seem like the most dangerous place to be, and they're made up statistics, by the way, is on a college campus. If you're on a college campus, two things are going to happen to you. Number one, you're going to have stupid liberal teachers, and number two, you're going to get raped. That apparently is the lesson of all major universities. And if that's the case, then why are people going to them? If the universities are themselves centers of racism, discrimination, transphobia, if universities themselves keep telling you how sexist, bigoted, and dangerous for women they are, why would people go to them? Stop going to them. Let the universities get their houses in order. The universities are making a lot of money trying to scare people. It's about time that people are standing up to them and say, okay, so if you're as bad as you pretend you are, if America's as bad as you say we are, and yet you're still worse, we're not going to your schools anymore. I think that's the way to reform the universities. The sooner you do this across the country, basically call the bluff of universities. All right, you keep telling us, universities, that rape culture is significantly high, even though you don't have the numbers to prove it. You keep telling us that, then what we ought to do is send women other places. Let's find alternatives for women to get educated, because you liberal progressives who've run universities for about 1,000 years don't know how to fix your own problems.
Yeah, well, Missouri, the state overall, is having even more issues because Missouri State University was just in the news. A Missouri State University professor basically said she needed pictures of male penises, and she was doing a study.
Is this like more cowbell? I need more penises?
There is what it is. And so she was doing a study about male self-esteem, and so she put out a request to have young men send her pictures of their penises so she could do whatever she was going to do with them. But there was such backlash, such response from the public, that she's cutting her study short. And she claims that all this...
Wait, cutting short in regards to penises is something speaking of male self-esteem, I urge you to rephrase that.
Nah, I'm going to leave it right there.
Okay, good.
Okay, so she claims by her name, she's a sociology professor, which I probably could have already called it. Alicia Walker, she said the submissions of the male penises for the study have already been, I guess, thrown out or somehow in some way gotten rid of, and that she didn't look at any of them. And she says, she didn't look at, is this like reading Playboy for the articles? She didn't look at, so she solicits penis pictures and doesn't look at them. Well, she was maybe waiting to get all of them at once.
I gotcha.
I'm not sure how she was conducting this study. Anyway, she voluntarily canceled it, and the university had said it was after the public reaction. But she says, I continue to believe the relationship between penis size and self-esteem is an important site of scientific inquiry, but the public reaction to the project threatens the reliability of the survey responses. The reliability of the study as a whole has been compromised.
Yeah, and just think about how much money, tenure, benefits are conferred on sociology professors who do this kind of crap all the time. When you think, and look, and I'm a humanities professor. I teach English in universities. With all due respect to humanities programs, we don't really do research anymore. And the soft sciences, sociology, anthropology, they don't really do research either. What we're doing now is the same mindless left-wing social engineering experiments over and over and over again. And I just would hasten to remind you that if a male sociologist had sent out a call for boobs pictures because he wanted to measure boob size and self-esteem, right?
Wow.
This person would no longer be employed by the university. You would have feminist professors all over the world calling them out. There would be questions about the legality about this, the ethics about this, the tact of all of this. But little sociology professor, apparently not having looked at the pictures that were sent to her, all I can say is, assuming she's married, and she's probably not. She's either single and angry or a lesbian. But let's assume she is married to a man. Can you imagine what this says subconsciously about her husband? Can you imagine being her husband?
I don't.
Is she actually sharing these pictures with her husband?
Honey, look what I got at work.
Right.
Here's what I did at
Honey,
work today.
Now, this is what I could have had when I got married, instead of marrying another English professor, right? This is what, you make it. Am I making a comparison between the craziness of universities and the relative smallness of their genitalia?
Yes.
Well, that would be
Yes,
just
you
as
are.
legitimate a sociology experiment as the one Missouri State's engaged in. But it gives all new meaning to the phrase "show me state."
Show me state.
I would like more "don't show me states"
There you go.
personally, but that's just me.
Well, as if crazy wasn't just more crazy, we have a professor who did great qualitative study by publishing a paper with her cats. Not just about her cats, with her cats. We have Susan Nordstrom, who's an assistant professor of educational research at the University of Memphis.
Hang on. We have finally found the subject area that actually makes sociology look legitimate. Educational research. So now we have found the one area of research on a college campus that legitimizes sociology. But please continue.
Okay, so in qualitative inquiry, they actually published this paper, and the byline is given to Susan Nordstrom and her cats. I'm not even sure how she pronounces the name, if it's Emily Nordstrom and Kunin Nordstrom. They are two cats. We have pictures of them.
Oh.
And here's the thing. Emily has passed away since.
Which one is Emily?
I'm not sure.
Because it really matters.
I don't know. Assist moving efforts.
Okay.
I'm not even sure. But so she publishes the story, or the article is called "Guilty of Loving You: A Multi-Species Narrative." The abstract says, "Writing together as we disrupt the categories between..."
Wait, did you say categories? Oh, for the love of God.
Between humans and animals, human-centered philosophical concepts, and human-centered narrative inquiry. In doing so, we offer an evocative multi-species narrative that tells a different story, a becoming with multiple species in nature cultures, as one word.
So here you have a woman who is obviously a lonely cat lady, who actually, when one of her cats dies, she finds a publisher, a so-called peer-reviewed publisher, who gives co-author credit to her cats, one of which is dead. Now, we need to research, is the cat really dead, or is it just in the refrigerator, scratching at the frozen fries? Is this a Dwight Schrute scenario here? Is Sprinkles really dead here?
Too soon, Sprinkles.
I'm thinking, when I picture this professor, I picture Angela on The Office, licking her cats, grooming them with her, oh, there you go, right? I take it back. It's more like Kate Flannery's character. It's more like Meredith, isn't it? But the picture alone tells you everything you need to know. And while we're sorry, I'm a big pet lover. I have numerous dogs, love my animals. I'm pretty sure I could not get a peer-reviewed article published with one of my dogs co-authoring it on any subject at all. This just begins to show you in the social sciences and the humanities how utterly absurd research has become. It's not research anymore. It is the same solipsistic, subjective, emotionally driven crap given jargon. You put it in jargon. You use a lot of jargon to express your feelings, because that's all she's doing in the article. She's expressing her feelings over the loss of her pet. And again, given the nature of this professor, I'm sympathetic. She's probably not likely to have any kind of a relationship beyond the cat level. Why are we sending billions of taxpayer money to these kinds of universities for these kinds of studies? Doesn't make any sense.
Well, because we need to hear from a professor, a Yale alumna who's now teaching at the University of Michigan. We need to hear about how the green movement is too white and too male. Dr. Dorcetta Taylor, a sociology professor, just argued that the green movement needs to become more inclusive, and that inclusivity means get rid of you white males who hold too many positions in these organizations. She offered up to this group of students who attended what they need to do to make these environmental groups more people of color, more green. One thing that green organizations should be doing is simply to stop being so afraid of people of color. Meet them, interact with them, cultivate them, identify students early, and start recruiting them.
Cultivate them, as in cult, right? So here's the problem, and the first thing that this story tells me is that this is the entire green movement is not about greening the planet. It's not about environmentalism. It's about politically correct environmentalism. So what you're telling me is that too many white people and too many white men care about the environment. And so rather than celebrate the fact that the most denigrated demographic in the world, white males, are actually woke when it comes to the environment, you, like a cat, pee all over them because, you know, white men really shouldn't care. White men are the villains in this narrative. So we've got to get uninterested black and Hispanic people to become environmentalists. Then they can take it out on white men too. This whole thing has absolutely nothing to do with the environment. This is just social value justice shaming, right? It's signaling your virtue is what this is. And it really bothers them that apparently the most progressive people in the room are white men. And that looks bad for the rest of us. And so whose fault is it that there are too many white men who care about the environment? It's white males' fault.
So first, do you identify as a male?
I used to. I mean, is it bad? But I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's career, good future career policy to continue to do so.
And that's a proper answer, because if you identify as a male, you cannot get a raise at a Canadian university.
There you go.
So the University of Guelph discovered.
Guelph.
Huh?
Guelph.
Guelph.
Yep.
All right.
I've actually been there.
Okay, then Guelph. Anyway, they discovered an average female faculty is being paid less. They did a study this last year, and it was done by the provost's office, Charlotte Yates, who's the provost, and they found this study out to be that women were making less than their male counterparts. On average, although there are plenty of women who are making more than their male counterparts. But so what do? Instead of looking at individual cases, which would be, you know,
individuality on a college campus is still my heart.
They decided, you know what, if you identify as a female, you're going to get a $2,050 raise automatically.
Identify as. You don't have to actually be a
correct.
female. That's exactly right.
That's correct. And just for the record, Charlotte Yates made $299,000 this last year.
Now look, here's the problem with this too. On average, women get paid less. Well, guess who is primarily STEM teachers? Mostly male. Guess who are primarily business professors? Mostly men. Those are the two areas in universities where the pay is radically different. If you're a business professor at a typical college, you're going to make 2, maybe 3 times what an English professor makes. Who's stopping women from joining STEM careers? Who's stopping women from entering careers as business professors? The answer, nobody. Not only are women being held out of careers, not only are women not being held out of careers in STEM and business, there are all sorts of affirmative action and STEM and programs, scholarship programs designed to get more women into high-paying STEM and business careers. And guess what? Just like apparently black and Hispanic people, when it comes to the environment, women aren't terribly interested in fancy-smancy laboratories or money or business programs. And so what ends up happening is by definition, all the people in those areas make more money, which means more men are making more money. And so we're going to fix that problem by giving all other people who identify as female $2,500 a year. My response at the University of Guelph: raise your hand. Everyone's a woman now. Hashtag we are all women now. Let everybody get the raise, because I'd love to see that happen. And if I were on the campus, I would do it. I'd love to be the man who says, I'm a woman. I'm a woman. All right? And I would love for the University of Guelph to come after me and say, hey, we don't think you are. Do you know what kind of a lawsuit I have against them? If they challenge and minimize and hurt my feelings because I said I'm a woman and they say that maybe I'm not, if that happens, this is a civil rights lawsuit waiting to happen. So bring it. Bring it, bring it. But can't wait for the university that I teach at to start doing something like this. Bring it.
All right, well, you can stay in the United States and do that. Otherwise, if you want to move up to Canada, I guess that's up to you. But if you want to identify as a female, you might as well go be a student at Princeton University, because they just announced that the student health plan is covering 80% of their cost of what they're calling transition-related care. And this includes hormone therapy and gender affirmation surgery. And there's no cap on how many of these expenses will be covered. And if you are a student there, unless you can tell them that you have, comparable health insurance elsewhere, you have to pay the $1,800 per year for this.
Bingo. And this is the problem. The vast majority of Princeton students are paying a lot more money for this niche surgery, these niche treatments. Now, again, this flatters the vanity of Princeton students, and mommy and daddy at Princeton are probably playing a lot of this anyway. But this is the problem we have with American universities. Everything we've talked about in the last 15 minutes, the ridiculous research agendas, the superficial value signaling, all of the diversity initiatives and the diversity czars and the diversity chancellors that have to get hired, to $300,000 we're paying people to come up with this brilliant point that on average women make less. And we're going to dole out $2,500 to people who identify as women. You want to know why your kids are getting a crappy education? You want to know why your kids are getting tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and still can't find jobs and still live in your basement and still want to vote for people like Bernie Sanders? Right here is where you have it. We have radically reached the point where your kids can become qualified, effective, smart people without necessarily having to set foot in one of these four-year universities. Time to think about that option.
Well, and here's the thing. They don't even need to go to university anymore. They can just become Starbucks employees, because Starbucks just announced last week that their facial feminization surgery will be covered. So since 2012, Starbucks has had a pro-transgender policy that would cover things basically on the bottom half, but now it's the top half in the cosmetic surgery. The vice president of benefits, Ron Crawford, said the approach was driven not just by the company's desire to provide truly inclusive coverage and by powerful conversations with transgender partners about how those benefits would allow them to truly be who they are. So now you can go to
If you
Starbucks.
need radical surgery, radical therapy, radical hormones to be truly who you are, then you are not that thing when you become it. It doesn't make any sense. But here's an interesting slant on this. Facial feminization surgery. I would argue that that has to, by definition, cover women who want facelifts, women who want eye lifts, women who want dental work, women who want any kind of hair treatments or any kind of waxing procedures, right? For Eastern European women, anything like that at all? That women, it's not just transgenders. If you're a woman, to be made to feel more feminine with your face, they have electrolysis, anything you want now. Go ahead and bleed them dry. Bleed those suckers dry. Starbucks has put themselves in a typically progressive conundrum here, that they've opened the door so wide that you can't keep anyone out or anything out. And by the way, if I'm a barista or baristo,
You're still barista.
sexist language. If I'm a baristo at Starbucks and I say I want, as a man, I want feminization treatments for my face, can't stop me from doing that either. Again, bring it, bring it, bring it. Can't wait to be a barista at Starbucks. And they tell me that I can't get my face feminized because technically I'm a man. I just want them to bring that on. So in other words, ladies, if you want abs and cosmetics, if what it takes to make my face feel more feminine is blush or eyeshadow or rouge or something, right? Then you have to cover that too, Starbucks, because that's part of the program. Keep doing it, liberals. Keep opening the door so wide. I believe that William F. Buckley once said, the purpose of an open mind is to shut it on certain issues. If you do not, you have simply abnegated the responsibility for thinking. Progressives no longer think, they are all feeling.
I'm still trying to get the image of you and rouge and all
Why
that
not?
out of my head.
It's part of my nature-given right.
There you go.
Right.
All right. Speaking of nature, let's talk about Little House on the Prairie, because Laura Ingalls Wilder had this prestigious award, and apparently because she's so racist, they are now pulling her name from the library award over these concerns. So we live in Fahrenheit 451 times, and now Laura Ingalls Wilder Award will forever be called the Children's Literature Legacy Award. Now we know Laura Ingalls Wilder wrote Little House on the Prairie, and everyone grew up reading it. But the Association for Library Service to Children, their board made this decision, and they said her works reflect dated cultural attitudes toward indigenous people and people of color that contradict modern acceptance, celebration, and understanding of diverse communities. ALSC has had to grapple with the inconsistency between Wilder's legacy and its core values of inclusiveness, integrity, and respect. And as a child of a librarian, this is ridiculous. All the librarians that I've talked to since this has happened are just upset.
This is clearly ridiculous, and I'll tell you why it's ridiculous. Laura Ingalls Wilder became very wildly famous, as you pointed out, for having written books for children but in particular for females. If you read the Little House on the Prairie books, they are very female-centric. They are designed to empower little girls. They tell the true story of what it was like to be a girl in the prairie, where the distinctions between male and female in terms of hard work, in terms of long days, in terms of lifting and carrying, in terms of survival, were minimized by the harsh conditions they faced. And now along comes the progressive group of librarians, and they say that books written 60, 70 years ago about life in America 150 years ago no longer reflect contemporary celebrations of diversity. Well, of course they don't, you morons. They celebrate their culture, not yours. This is the problem with all progressives, particularly academics. Librarians fall into the heading of academics in this sense, that anything that doesn't mirror your own woke pieties is racist, sexist, bigoted, and homophobic. Here's the next step for progressives, and it's going to happen sooner than you think. Let's just get rid of all books written before 2015 or 2018 or 2021. Let's get rid of all books, because no possible book written even 3 years ago, let alone 80 years ago, can be quite as woke and progressive as the books written today. Every book written more than 6 months ago is going to exclude somebody for some reason. So this is what they want. A kind of, you mentioned Fahrenheit 451. This is an Orwellian erasure of the complete past, right? Every book written every book written 1 hour ago includes people born in the last 59 minutes. And so let's only study literature. Let's only read books. Let's get rid of the entire category of history. Let's get rid of all art history. Let's get rid of, empty your museums and burn the contents, because something's going to offend somebody. Let's make everything presentist. Let's make everything focused only narcissistically on ourselves, and that's the definition of progressives. Selfish narcissists with no sense of the past, with no conception of the future, with no awareness of consequences, making themselves feel better by censoring, destroying, prohibiting, and banning. Welcome to the modern progressive party.
Speaking of Bernie Sanders, we've given an automatic title this week to Bernie Sanders for being dunce of the day. It was too easy to make him that, because we just found out recently that he made more than $1 million last year for the second year in a row. A lot of it has to do with his book deals and the political revolution that he's creating. Basically, he's been railing against the so-called 1% and all this income inequality. I mean, this is what his whole platform has been, and how all the income inequality is the great moral issue of our time. And yet, here he is, finding out second year in a row, he's made more than $1 million.
Well, and Bernie Sanders has made all that money without really having to work for it. I mean, again, I ask you, think about the 40, 50-year career of Bernie Sanders in politics. Can you name one piece of legislation with his name on it? Can you point to one major legislative accomplishment? Can you tell me one meaningful thing he's done? No, I can't either. And so he may not be in the 1%, but he's certainly in the top 5% of wage earners for having done nothing, for having worked at the public, sucked at the public teat for all these years. And here's another thing. Let's just not talk about his income, which is staggering for somebody who's basically been a senator for all these years, and his holdings and his assets. Let's also talk about the government perks he gets. All the Cadillac medical care, all the mailing privileges, all the housing privileges and allowances, all the many, many, many ways that this huge income is utterly supplemented by this cash cow of being in the United States Senate. And yet that's the very system, hypocritically, Bernie Sanders pretends he wants to overthrow. No, he doesn't. No, you don't, Bernie. You don't. Because I guarantee you, if you were able to have the ultimate power in the land, you wouldn't abolish your own office. And you wouldn't abolish your own perks. You wouldn't make things better than for anybody else. You just don't do that. And you can pretend all you want that you're a man of the people, but you're not. You are about as elite as, in fact, you're more elite. I would argue that the average billionaire with all his influence doesn't have the influence to power you have as a rich senator from Vermont. So in a way, you are among the most privileged elite people in the entire country, and you show no signs of doing anything to help anybody else.
Well, he's helped inspire fellow socialists to come out and be elected to public office. Very quickly, I just want to hit on this because it's something that everyone needs to pay attention to. Recently, New York had its primary, and Alexandria, I think it's Ocasio-Cortez, she's 28 years old, and as of November was still a bartender, but she came out and defeated in the Democratic primary Representative Joseph Crowley, who up until this time is the number 4 Democrat in the House. And people were talking about him and how he may replace Nancy Pelosi, but he can't even get out of his own primary because you have an outright socialist who came out and defeated him.
Well, there are a lot of factors why this woman won. I mean, one is the same thing that happened in the Republican primaries is happening in the Democrat primaries, which is there's a war on incumbency, which I personally support. Now, it makes sense. If Democrats are going to go after their own incumbents, they're going to go after liberals. They're not going to replace them with conservatives. They're going to replace them with more wackadoodle liberals, right? And that's exactly what happened here. It's not surprising. In fact, that's what's happened on the conservative side as well. When conservatives go after incumbents, they don't replace them with more Paul Ryan. No one in the world saying, I need me some more Paul Ryan, right? It's especially worse on the Democrat side of the aisle, where the Democrat politicians always pretend that their constituencies are the poor and the downtrodden. It makes sense. If you want to make the argument that Republicans are all privileged and entitled rich guys, even though the Democrats in the House and the Senate have more money than the Republicans do, you want to make that argument, go ahead. But then you can't blame Republicans, right, for not being populist in that way, where the Democrats have to be. So I think that looking at the district that she won in, it's not surprising. It's kind of good that Crowley's out. He's been a big pain in the butt, virtue signaling loser for about 25 years. This woman, with her inability to shut her mouth, she's going to think that her radical socialist populism is going to carry the country, and it's not. So we'll see what happens, but sign of the times, I think, when to be an incumbent, and it's a good thing, I think, when incumbents, people who spent way too much time in government, are getting finally removed.
That's right, and we'll have a lot more of that as we get closer to November. Let us know, though, about what you think about what we were thinking this week with Dunce of the Day. Should Bernie Sanders have been Dunce of the Day? I think the answer is yes. But either way, leave us a like on Facebook, give us a review on iTunes and SoundCloud. And up next, we have Charlie Kirk with Talking Points.
Very excited to be back again with Talking Points. Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, joins us in this weekly spot. Charlie, today I want to talk to you about how the left has had a lot of success transforming patriotism in this country into some kind of xenophobia or racism, how the American flag has been transformed into the greatest symbol of liberty in the history of the world to now some kind of a quasi-Nazi symbol. Talk a little bit about how the left has done this.
Well, look, the growth of anti-Americanism in this country and on American campuses is absolutely stunning to me. America is the greatest country in the history of the world. Make no mistake. It is the greatest country ever to exist. And because of that, we have to unapologetically defend and advance the ideas and principles and values that have made this country great. And with it is our symbols. The American flag is a very important symbol for a lot of reasons. And the coloration means something. So, for example, the red in the American flag represents the blood that our soldiers, sacrificed overseas, that they died for our freedoms and liberties. The blue represents the togetherness, the unity of our country. The white, the innocence of those that have yet to see life at all, and that we have to look for future generations. So there's significance of every part of our American flag more than anything else. If those people that have traveled the world, and I've had the opportunity to travel the world quite a lot, that American flag means so much to dissidents in authoritarian regimes. When people see that American flag, they smile because they know what that means. That American flag means freedom. It means liberty. It means justice. It means that hope is on the horizon. It means something good. It means I can think that tomorrow will be better than today. And for people to burn that American flag, I think actually people absolutely have the constitutional right to burn the American flag. Absolutely. But I think it's the wrong thing to do on every single level, because you are burning a symbol that people died for, that people bled for, that represents the greatest civilization ever to exist.
Yeah, and when you think about within the boundaries of this country, the attack on ICE, it is amazing. The liberals seem to smell blood in the air with these fake Photoshop pictures of Donald Trump and little babies. What you have happening now is radical elements of the left are arguing that ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Bureau, are basically a terrorist organization that are setting up terrorist camps that are terrorizing little kids and families. It's amazing how bad the rhetoric has gotten on this.
I mean, to think that our own immigration enforcement agency, so here's what the left really wants. It's not about Border Patrol. It's not about ICE. It's about the rule of law. They want the complete and total abolition of standards and principles that will enforce the rule of law. So how do they do that? They go after the quote-unquote stormtroopers that are actually enforcing the rule of law. Now, I don't want a police state, but I also believe in the enforcement of laws. The more laws, the less justice, but the lack of enforcement of those laws is anarchy. And then you have selective enforcement, which is then is a statist regime, which is very similar to the Soviet Union, where you have some laws that matter and those that don't. And how do you enforce them? Well, it's how well you know Stalin. And that's really, unfortunately, the Marxist digression in America. They want to create chaos because then they can create control. Remember, control is always comes before chaos. You cannot get to absolute control unless you burn the system down. You have people pitted against each other, and you have the complete and total rejection and rebellion against the status quo and the rule of law. That's why they're going after ICE. That's why they're going after Border Patrol. That's why they're going after things that matter. Because as soon as you're able to destabilize the status quo, and you have people running amok, and you have individuals that say, I don't have to listen to that law, I don't have to that law matters, this law doesn't, then at that point the state can come in a time of absolute and total anarchy and chaos and control everything, which is their absolute goal.
Right, and that history backs you up on that from all the great liberal progressive movements of the last 100 years, from Bolshevism to Nazism to fascism to communism. All of them operate the same way. They begin in anarchy. And speaking of anarchy, just last week, the leading candidate to become the president of Mexico is basically now running on a platform that if you elect me, I will immediately begin to ship Mexican citizens into America. He said, quote, soon, very soon, after the victory of our movement, we will defend migrants all over the American continent and the migrants of the world who by necessity must abandon their towns to find life in the United States. It is a human right that we will defend.
I mean, you think about that. He believes in no borders. He believes in the abolition of borders. He wants globalism. This is what the left is trying to achieve. They want one world government, one world language. Multiculturalism is a Trojan horse to destroy cultures under the guise of the assimilation of culture. Think about that. It's a really, that's a multi-hour conversation to have. But through trying to say we want all these cultures to be mixed together, they actually want to destroy them all and create one. That is force, that is coercion, that is destruction. And look, the American culture is unique. It's based on ideas, it's found on meritocracy, on hard work, on risk-taking, on entrepreneurial capacity and ability, and so on and so forth. And the further you get away from that, and the more you digress, all of a sudden you get into this socialist European welfare state globalist model that can be very, very dangerous to Western civilization.
It's also remarkably hypocritical, too, because these leaders of places like Mexico, they see us as having no borders, not allowed to have borders, yet look at the way Mexico enforces its own immigration policies. You try to sneak into Mexico illegally, unless you're heading to the United States, where they're going to fast-track that, you don't have a lot of rights as an immigrant in Mexico.
That's correct. That's exactly right. In Mexico, they deport people immediately. I mean, if I were to go into Mexico and just try to be an illegal immigrant, they would deport me and they would detain me and they'd kick me out. Here, we give you breakfast, lunch, and dinner, free everything, welfare, and then we create a political party around you called the Democrat.
Well said, Charlie. It's always a great pleasure to speak with you. Enjoy your day. We will talk to you again next week. Look forward to it.
God bless you and God bless this beautiful country.
And that does it for the Dr. Duke Show this week. For Freedom Project, I am Dr. Duke, and we'll see you next time.